She said I didn't earn it, so I took it back quietly. There's something about betrayal that feels colder when it comes from your own blood. It doesn't shout. It doesn't break things. It just looks you in the eye and tells you that everything you built means nothing. That afternoon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office. The blinds were half closed, slicing the room into thin stripes of light and shadow. A single folder sat on the table in front of me, thick, heavy. The label read, Revised Will, Confidential. I stared at it for a long time before I touched it, because the moment I opened that file, I knew what I was about to do couldn't be undone. My daughter, Sarah, used to sit on my shoulders at the county fair, sticky ice cream melting down her hands, calling me her hero. She once told me, Dad, when I grow up, I want to work hard like you. And maybe that's where I went wrong. I worked too hard for her, not with her. Years later, she stood in front of me, diamonds on her neck, success in her tone, and said, You didn't earn this money, Dad. You just held on to it. 16 words that hit harder than any punch I've ever taken. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. Because when someone you love crosses that line, words don't matter anymore. Only actions do. She thought I was old, soft, finished. She thought I'd crumble, or beg, or explain. But what she didn't know was that I'd been building plans longer than she'd been alive. So I smiled, the way old men smile when they've already made up their mind. And I decided to take back everything. Not out of anger, but precision. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't come from rage. It comes from clarity. And I was very, very clear. You see, I wasn't just planning to get my money back. I was going to teach her something no amount of wealth could buy. The price of disrespect. Every parent has that moment. The second when love turns into a lesson. This was mine. So I called David, my lawyer of 30 years, the man who helped me build every piece of my estate. He didn't ask why. He just looked at me, then at the folder, and said quietly, You sure about this, Grant? I nodded. I'm not taking revenge, David. I'm correcting an equation. Because she thought she'd taken my fortune. But I still owned the foundation, the rules, the story, and stories, when rewritten properly, can destroy a person far more effectively than anger ever could. This isn't a story about greed. It's a story about balance, and how easily love can turn into leverage when someone forgets who built their comfort. So stay with me, because what started as a daughter's insult became a father's quiet justice, one that unfolded in ways she never saw coming. 3 things will happen in this story. First, you'll see how easily power blinds people. Then you'll learn how silence can be louder than rage. And finally, you'll understand that some debts aren't paid with money, but humiliation. Stay till the end, because the quietest revenge is always the loudest. Before I tell you how it ended, let me take you back to the day it all began. The moment my daughter looked at me and I realized she wasn't just taking my money, she was taking my name. That was the day I stopped being her father and started becoming her consequence. I was 67 when the doctor said the word stroke. It wasn't a big one, just enough to remind me I was no longer unbreakable. Lying in that hospital bed, watching the heart monitor beep in slow rhythm, I thought about 2 things: my late wife, Evelyn, and our daughter, Sarah. Evelyn and I built everything from nothing. She was a school teacher, and I was a structural engineer, a man who spent his life making sure things didn't fall apart. Funny how I failed to do that with my own family. When Evelyn died, Sarah was 21, too young to lose her mother, too proud to admit she missed her. I promised myself I'd give her the kind of life her mother always wanted for her: safety, education, comfort. I didn't realize that in giving her everything, I was also taking something away: the hunger to earn it. Over the years, I watched her transform, from a girl who asked me how bridges held their weight, to a woman who only asked, How much does it pay? Still, she was my daughter, my pride, my last reason to keep working, to keep saving, even after retirement. After the stroke, my lawyer, David, came to see me. He said gently, Grant, maybe it's time to write your will. I nodded. We drew up the papers. every cent, every property, every investment, to Sarah, with one condition: maintain the Evelyn Grant Scholarship Fund for underprivileged girls. That was all I asked. One legacy, one name, one memory. She smiled when she signed the papers, kissed my forehead. Don't worry, Dad. I'll make you proud. I wanted to believe her. I really did. 3 months later, the fund was gone. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe an accounting issue. Maybe she moved it to another account. But then I saw the notice in the paper. Grant Estate Mansion sold. New owner moves in. My house. The house I built with my own hands. Sold like an old appliance at a yard sale. The scholarship account was closed. The balance, 0. And the money? Transferred to Sarah Grant Holdings LLC. It was like waking up in a life I didn't recognize. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. This time, she picked up. Sarah, I said quietly. Why did you sell the house? There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you everything before the words do. Then, her voice, steady, cold. Because it was just sitting there, Dad. You weren't using it. I swallowed hard. And the scholarship fund? Your mother's name? Her sigh came through the line. Dad, people don't care about old charity names. It's outdated. You're outdated. And then she said it. The sentence that cut deeper than the stroke ever did. You didn't earn this money, Dad. You just kept it. Silence. No shouting. No crying. Just silence. I remember staring at the papers on my desk. The deed, the fund statement, her signature. The same handwriting I used to help her practice on the kitchen table. The same hands that once clung to mine crossing the street, now signing me out of my own life. That night, I sat in the dark. No TV, no lights. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the taste of betrayal. There's something strange about heartbreak at my age. It doesn't burn, it freezes. And the colder it gets, the clearer you start to see. I realized then that this wasn't about money. It was about legacy. The one thing she couldn't buy, sell, or understand. She thought she'd stripped me of everything, but she'd forgotten one detail. I built every inch of her world, and I still knew where all the beams were buried. I didn't yell. I didn't call her names. I didn't even call David back that night. Instead, I poured myself a drink, watched the ice melt, and whispered to no one. She thinks I'll walk away quietly. She doesn't know silence can be a weapon. I slept better that night than I had in months, because revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with calm. When the storm inside you settles into still water, that's when the reflection becomes clear. I wasn't just going to take back what she stole. I was going to teach her what real earning looks like. From that night on, every morning had a purpose again. I woke up early, made coffee, and started reading every financial record, every legal clause, every document I'd ever signed, every signature she'd overlooked, every loophole she'd ignored. The plan was already forming, quiet, deliberate, surgical. She thought she'd inherited everything, but what she really inherited was me, and I wasn't done yet. Revenge doesn't happen in a burst of anger. It happens in silence. In the long, measured moments when you watch the person who hurt you start to feel safe. After Sarah took everything, I didn't chase her. I didn't yell, didn't demand answers, didn't even call once. I simply watched. From my small apartment overlooking the river, I started collecting newspaper clippings. There she was, smiling in magazine interviews, standing beside men twice her age, boasting about her new company. A self-made woman. One headline said, self-made. That word made me laugh out loud. Every photo told me more than she thought. The champagne glass, the expensive shoes, the rented penthouse. She was playing rich, not living it. And people who play rich never notice what's being built behind them. Her interviews became my study material. She said she'd turn my old-fashioned money into something modern. She said she didn't believe in legacy. She said, I make my own name. So I decided to make sure she never used mine again. Weeks passed, and she burned through cash faster than she could make it. The mansion I built, sold. The cars, bought in cash. The charity in her mother's name, gone, just like Evelyn's portrait she threw out years ago. And still, she smiled for the cameras. She had no idea that every time her photo hit the paper, I smiled too, not with pride, but with patience, because she thought she'd written the last chapter of this story. I was just editing the ending. I called David. He'd been my lawyer for 30 years, my friend for nearly 40. He knew the story of my life better than anyone. The mistakes, the sacrifices, the promises. When I told him what I wanted to do, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a long time. "Grant," he said quietly, "you're not getting any younger. This could make things messy." I nodded. "So did fatherhood." He hesitated. "You sure about this?" I smiled. "I'm not taking revenge, David. I'm restoring balance." He studied me for another moment, then finally said, "All right, let's get to work." We spent days going through the documents she hadn't bothered to read. Every clause, every signature, the house, the land, the remaining investments, all still under trust structures she never fully transferred. Her arrogance had left me doors to walk back through, doors I'd built myself. David and I drafted what we called the revised will. We named a single beneficiary, the Evelyn Grant Foundation, the same charity Sarah had dissolved, but this time it came with an unbreakable clause. Any individual proven to have withdrawn, redirected, or dissolved the foundation's assets is permanently disqualified from inheritance. David raised an eyebrow. "That's surgical." I replied, "No, it's, poetic." We filed the papers quietly. No announcements, no leaks. The bank froze the prior accounts under the foundation's name and moved the holdings into a protected portfolio. In one afternoon, the fortune she believed she controlled disappeared into a trust she could never touch again. It wasn't theft. It was correction. She took my legacy. I took her illusion. I made one final visit to the estate, the one she'd turned into a showroom of her own ego. I walked the hallways, touched the cold marble, and smiled. She didn't even notice I was there. The staff thought I was a guest of the new owner. In a way, I was. I'd sold that house decades ago, the moment I signed it over to her. Now, I was buying something far more valuable. Her lesson. Revenge is theater. You don't just punish, you prepare the audience. So I started acting the part. The frail father, the tired old man who'd given up. I canceled my golf membership, stopped showing up to community dinners, even started using a cane I didn't need. Let her think I was fading. Because when people think you're dying, they stop watching your hands. Sarah began visiting again. At first, out of guilt, or maybe curiosity. She'd bring flowers, sit beside me, talk about her company. Her words were sugar. Her eyes were calculation. She'd ask small, careful questions. "Have you updated your will, Dad? You should really make sure the paperwork's clear." I told her I'd taken care of everything, and I had. One night, she hugged me and said, "You're not still mad, right?" I looked her in the eye and smiled. "No, sweetheart, I'm just tired." That was the last time she left my house happy. Behind her, on the kitchen counter, lay an envelope she never noticed, marked, "Legal copies revised." She didn't open it. She never thought she needed to. The stage was set. The actors were in place. All I had to do now was wait for the curtain to rise. Because revenge isn't about striking first. It's about waiting until they think you never will. And the beauty of it, she was about to learn the hard way that silence is not surrender. It's strategy. The plan needed one last thing, timing. And fate, it seems, enjoys good theater. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The mailman found me on the floor of my kitchen, motionless. It wasn't a heart attack, just a fainting spell. But news doesn't care about the truth. By noon, half the town believed I'd passed away. By evening, the story reached Sarah, and within an hour, she called David. "David, we need to activate my father's will immediately," she said, pretending her voice was trembling. He wanted me to take care of things. She didn't even wait for confirmation. To her, I was already gone, and the fortune was already hers. David called me later that night while I was in the hospital bed, oxygen clipped to my finger, monitors quietly beeping. "She's pushing for the reading," he said. "You ready?" I smiled beneath the breathing mask. I've been ready for a long time. 2 days later, I passed away on paper. A clerical illusion, temporary, but official enough to trigger the will. No funeral, no body, just a legal process. The reading took place in David's downtown office, an old building with oak walls and brass fixtures, a place that smelled like power and dust. Sarah arrived in black, like a movie widow, even wore sunglasses indoors. She wasn't mourning, she was performing. Around her sat a few distant relatives, some former employees, and a handful of people from the foundation board. David stood by the window, folder in hand. Revised will, confidential. When Sarah saw that label, she frowned. "Wait," she said. "That's not the file I signed." David met her eyes, his tone steady. "No, it isn't." He took a deep breath and began to read. "This is the final and legally binding testament of Grant William. To my daughter, Sarah Grant, I leave $1 and a lesson worth every cent." The room went dead silent. Then came the whispers, chairs creaked, someone gasped, Sarah's face turned white, then red. Her hands gripped the armrest of her chair until her nails dug into the leather. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" she snapped. David didn't flinch. "It means exactly what it says." "He can't do this," she shouted, standing up. David calmly closed the folder. "He already did." She froze, staring at him, the realization creeping in slow, like ice down her spine. "The remainder of the estate," David continued, "including all assets, investments, and properties, is hereby transferred in full to the Evelyn Grant Foundation, to be used exclusively for educational purposes." Sarah blinked, disbelieving. "That foundation doesn't even exist anymore." David looked straight at her. "It does now. He re-established it 6 months ago." That was the moment she understood. The trap she'd walked right back into. The one built with her mother's name. The reporters outside didn't help. Someone leaked the story to the press within hours. Engineer donates $1.2 million to revive late wife's charity. Daughter disinherited after misusing family funds. The headlines hit like shrapnel. By nightfall, her phone was full of calls from journalists. By morning, the internet had already named her the greedy heiress. The same faces that once praised her were now tearing her apart. People dug up everything, the luxury trips, the fake philanthropy events, the way she bragged about making her own fortune. She called David first, furious. "You tell them to stop this. You fix it." He sighed. "Sarah, your father's estate is locked under a legal trust. It's ironclad. You can't reverse it." "That's impossible. It's my money." "No, Sarah," he said quietly. "It was his. And now, it belongs to something bigger than either of you." I watched the news from my hospital bed, the screen reflecting in my glasses. The anchor smiled as he read my obituary. Grant William, retired engineer and philanthropist, leaves behind a legacy of education and generosity. Legacy. That word hadn't sounded right for years, but that night it did. The next morning, I was discharged. No one knew I was alive except David. I signed a simple statement. Living under a medical privacy clause. The world could believe what it wanted. I had nothing left to prove. Meanwhile, Sarah's empire began to crumble. Investors pulled out. Her startup's board removed her as CEO. The mansion she'd sold was now occupied by strangers who didn't even know her name. She'd built her throne out of borrowed gold, and I'd repossessed every ounce. Days later, she showed up at David's office again, tear-streaked, shaking. "I want to contest it. I want to fight." David sighed. "There's nothing to fight, Sarah. He didn't disown you. He simply redirected what you destroyed." "I didn't destroy anything," she yelled. He handed her a document, a copy of her signature dissolving the original foundation. She stared at it, trembling. This isn't fair." He nodded softly. "Neither was what you did." For a moment, she just stood there, broken, lost, the reflection of her mother's face flickering in the glass. Outside, the press cameras flashed. Her humiliation was public, complete, irreversible. I didn't attend the chaos. I didn't need to. Because revenge isn't about watching them burn. It's about knowing the match was yours. That night, David called me again. "It's done," he said simply. I looked out at the city lights, the same skyline I'd once built bridges for. "She took my money," I said quietly. "I took her reputation, He chuckled. You always were an engineer, Grant. Even your revenge has perfect structure. I hung up and poured myself a drink. Whiskey. Neat, like Evelyn used to pour on winter nights. Outside, rain began to fall, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Because revenge isn't loud, it's precise, and silence, when aimed correctly, is the loudest sound in the world. Revenge doesn't always end with applause. Sometimes it ends with silence, the kind that hums in the corners of your chest long after the war's over. A week after the will was read, David came by my apartment with a plain envelope. She'll get this today, he said quietly. I nodded. Then it's done. Inside the envelope was a single letter, my handwriting, neat and deliberate, and a laminated volunteer badge for the Evelyn Grant Foundation. The letter read, You said I didn't earn it, so now neither of us have it. The money went to those who still believe in work. If you want to earn something, start there. No anger, no judgment, just truth. Inked in black and final. Sarah received it 2 days later. She opened it in the lobby of her new apartment. Smaller, quieter, lonelier than the mansion she once bragged about. Neighbors didn't recognize her. The doorman barely looked up. The press had already moved on to their next scandal. Fame burns fast, but shame lingers longer. When she unfolded the paper, I imagine her hands shook. She read the words once, twice, maybe 3 times. Then she saw the badge, gold letters engraved beneath the logo her mother designed decades ago. Evelyn Grant Foundation, volunteer. Her name, Sarah Grant, printed underneath. No title, no inheritance, just a chance. She tried calling me that night. The phone buzzed on my table. Once, twice. I didn't answer. It rang again the next morning. Still, I'd let it pass. Because forgiveness is not a phone call. It's a process. And I wasn't done healing yet. The papers called me the father who taught America the price of greed. They said I'd staged the most poetic lesson in modern inheritance law. The man who built bridges and burned one to save his soul. Funny, how strangers always make sense of things faster than the people inside them. I didn't crave their praise. I didn't need the spotlight. All I wanted was quiet. The kind of quiet you earn after finally saying everything without words. Every morning, I walk down to the lake behind my building. It's small, barely a mile around. But when the sun hits it right, the whole surface glows gold. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, sit on the same wooden bench, and watch ducks float past like they had nowhere else to be. In those moments, I didn't feel victorious, just balanced. Then one morning, I opened the newspaper and saw her picture, not on the front page, just a small square near the community section. The caption read, Former heiress volunteers to rebuild scholarship program in mother's name. She was standing behind a table stacked with books, handing out forms to students. Her smile wasn't forced this time. It looked real. For the first time in years, she looked like Evelyn. I sat there for a long while, tracing the edge of the photo with my thumb. Part of me wanted to call her. Another part knew it wasn't time. Yet, she'd found her lesson, and maybe one day, she'd find her way back to me. But for now, the silence between us said enough. It wasn't anger anymore. It was distance, the kind that teaches. David visited a few days later, carrying a new issue of the same paper. She's doing good work, he said. The foundation's growing fast. She's there every day. I nodded, staring out at the lake. She's earning it, I murmured. He smiled. So are you. When he left, I poured myself another cup of coffee and leaned back, feeling the sunlight on my face. A single duck drifted toward shore, small, determined, perfectly alone. I watched it cut through the reflection of the sky and thought of Evelyn, of Sarah, of everything between us that couldn't be fixed with money. She lost the money. I lost a daughter, but one of us still had dignity. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. A year passed. Time, like interest, has a way of collecting quietly. The Evelyn Foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. What began as a final act of revenge had become something else, a legacy reborn. Scholarships were awarded again, buildings restored. The name Evelyn, spoken with kindness instead of nostalgia. The night of the first scholarship ceremony, I drove into the city. The community hall was filled with soft light and quiet chatter. Students in worn jackets held thank you cards. Volunteers handed out programs. And there at the very back of the room sat Sarah. She wasn't in designer clothes this time. No diamonds, no audience, no cameras. Just a plain dress and tired eyes that had learned humility the hard way. She didn't see me. She didn't need to. The MC took the stage, an older woman with kind eyes and a voice like calm water. She began to speak about the foundation's mission, about Evelyn's dream to help children who had nothing but determination. Then she opened a small card, a quote from my will. Some debts aren't paid with money, they're paid with time. The room fell silent, and in that silence, I saw Sarah's shoulders tremble. Her hand covered her mouth as tears slipped down her face. It wasn't the tears of loss anymore. It was understanding, the kind that arrives late, but right on time. The applause began soft, then grew, rippling through the hall like forgiveness itself. Students lined up to receive their scholarships, small envelopes holding something bigger than money. Hope. I stood by the doorway, unseen, watching her. She turned slightly as if she could feel me there, and for a second, her eyes swept the back of the room. But I didn't move. I didn't need to. Revenge had already done its work, not through destruction, but through correction. Not through hatred, but through silence that finally made her listen. When the ceremony ended, she lingered for a while, talking softly with one of the students. She laughed once, a quiet, unfamiliar sound I hadn't heard since she was a child. When she finally turned toward the door, I was gone. I walked down to the lake behind the building, the same lake I visit every morning. The air was cool, the water golden under the sinking sun. A breeze stirred the surface, breaking my reflection into ripples. I sat on a bench, opened my thermos, and watched the light stretch across the horizon. The sound of distant laughter carried from the hall, soft, fading, almost peaceful. And I thought of Evelyn, how she'd probably smile at what we'd done, how she'd forgive me for turning grief into justice. She said I didn't earn it. Maybe she was right. I didn't earn the money. I earned the right to take it back. The sun dipped lower, painting the lake in amber. I took one last sip of coffee and whispered to the wind. Balance restored. Somewhere behind me, the foundation banner fluttered. The Evelyn Grant Scholarship for those who still believe in work. And that was enough. But life has a way of testing peace. Because just when I thought my story was finished, someone else decided to write their own. Next time, I'll tell you how my son-in-law tried to steal my house and ended up paying rent for life.